All right, welcome back. We are fired up for another edition of the DTNsights podcast. I am your host, Renny Vandewege. I serve as the general manager of weather intelligence for DTN, and we have a really fun one on tap for today. We're talking about the live event industry. We're in the middle of summer. There are events going on worldwide, and no one better to join me today than Jacob Worek, the Senior Operations Manager of the UK Crowd Management Association, and a friend of mine for a long time. Jacob, it is great to see you. How are you doing today?
Doing wonderful, Renny. Thank you for having me on here.
Absolutely. So let's start a little bit about you. You have a very interesting career. Would love to hear about how your career got started, what you have been working through over time, and how you've ended up with the UK CMA up to this point.
Well, I guess at its core, I guess you could say I'm a distractible boy. But yeah, I've pretty much worn any hat that a person can possibly wear in the live event industry. I mean, I started out back in high school and college doing basement shows and raves and fields and working at the radio station in college, and just anything I could do to avoid taking on responsibility, right, and going to class. And then eventually that got into doing a little bit of nightclub work, working the door, working AV, worked for a rental agency doing corporate AV, eventually moved into venue management, overseeing operations for a couple of outdoor amphitheaters. And that's really, I guess, when you could say my professional career began, was there. Eventually, I was getting a little bit burned out on the entertainment industry and decided I was going to transition into construction health and safety. And so I, decided to pursue another degree. And I started to see these, interconnections between what was happening in the construction industry and what was happening in live events. Now, this would have been probably I guess late 2000s, maybe 2010, somewhere along that line. And it was the heyday of blogs on the internet, when anyone could throw up a website and just run their mouth, and it was the Wild West. And I started a blog, and I started writing about this interconnection between live events, which I knew, and construction, which I was learning. And that kept going on for about a year or so. And then many people would recall the stage roof collapse at the Indiana State Fair back in 2011. And I had, I had a few media publications because here in the States, event safety really wasn't at the top of everyone's conversation at that point. So the reporters do what reporters do. They scoured the internet and they found me. And I was completely out of my depth at this point because I was looking to get out of the entertainment industry. And eventually I spoke with some of them. I, shared what insight I had on the event at that moment. And I was contacted as a result of that by a gentleman by the name of Jim Digby, who, along with a number of other touring professionals, was starting a group which became the Event Safety Alliance. And it started out, he was just like, hey, do you want to write a few things for our website? I'm like, sure. And then he's like, do you want to do a few more things for the website, for us? Yeah, sure, why not? And the next thing you know, I became sort of ESA's first full-time employee. So I spent about 12 years with the Event Safety Alliance. And then I was starting to feel that little itch again of like, I need to see what else is out there. And so went over to a different company to be their national director of safety. Had a fantastic time, wonderful people, but being with a nonprofit that was focused on education and advocacy within the safety realm, it just kept calling back to me. And I had known the folks at the United Kingdom Crowd Management Association for several years because along with ESA, we partnered to create the Global Crowd Management Alliance, which we can touch on at some point. And they said, look, we're looking for someone like you. We want someone to come in and help, grow this organization. Would you be interested in joining us? And I immediately went, well, I'm not in the UK. How's that going to work? And they're like, you'll be the night shift. So So basically now I have, joined over with the UK CMA and the wonderful folks over there, and helping to advance their mission and, keep the conversation of event safety moving forward.
Yeah, it's amazing. And, DTN has been associated with all three associations. We're really proud of that. I've always admired for you the respect that you've had for essentially safety in general, safety of weather when it comes to crowds, and sort of touching and educating so many people. And those that have heard me talk on this subject will understand, or have heard me say this before, but the maturity from that Indiana State Fair incident of outdoor events and weather safety to what it is today, and I guess we're approaching 15 years at this point, of kind of thinking about that as a problem, is amazing to me. It's really impressive how serious all of the different angles of event safety have improved over that time frame, including weather safety. And so I want to personally thank you, because you've had a huge impact on that over the past 15 years.
Well, I will say thank you. I can claim very little credit for that. There are so many incredibly intelligent people out there doing fantastic work in this space, and I think it is looking back at 15 years, I'm very happy with where the industry is, and yet I just see there's still so much work to do. This is, in any realm of safety, it's very Sisyphusian. I think I'm saying that correctly. It's like you're constantly pushing that boulder up the hill only to have it roll back down on you again. But you have to keep pushing that. And, I will turn it back around and say one of the, being engaged with you personally and professionally over at and the folks at DTN has been, incredibly helpful in sort of forwarding that message. When the conversation here in the States about the Event Safety Alliance, and also happening within the GCMA, our global entity, and even with the UK CMA, is, it's a highlight to that this is a collaborative process. It's not just our association that's out there screaming. DTN and entities like DTN, they get it, and they're helping to amplify this. So that's not me brown nosing. That's me just giving credit where credit's due, Renny. We honestly could not have done it without partners like DTN.
Yeah, and me either. It's just been a really fun part in my career to watch the growth of this. It's been fun. And so DTN being quite involved, the outdoor safety market's a really important one for us. This year, we focused on providing a survey to people in the industry with the goal of creating a report. We have issued that report. It is called the Weather Risk in Event Operations, the Gap Between Forecasts, Decisions, and Outcomes. We're really proud of how that report came out. You were a really instrumental person in helping us craft the report and getting the word out about the survey so that we could get response. A lot of the answers came back from North America. Naturally, there's a lot of people that we interact with in the North American market. But given your role with the UK Crowd Management Association, we wanted to get some of your perspective on kind of the global feel and the European feel as well on those answers and how they translate. I guess just generically, do you feel as though that kind of the responses we saw in that report do reflect the feelings in the UK and Europe in terms of that gap that we found? We know that we need to move more towards decisioning as opposed to just getting weather forecasts. Or what experiences do you think are similar and different in that case?
Well, in reading through the report, one of the things that jumped out to me was that how similar it is across markets. You, as someone who is obviously not based in Europe nor in the United Kingdom, but is engaged in that, there's always this concern that maybe what we're dealing with here in North America is very different than what we're dealing with in Europe or in the United Kingdom or elsewhere. And in reading the results here, it kind of confirmed what I have learned over time, which is it's not all that different. I mean, there are You will have specifics from market to market to market, just like you have here in the States, differences between state and state and state in terms of the regulatory environment that you're operating in. But the concerns of event organizers are largely the same. It is you're dealing with your infrastructure, you're dealing with your crowds, you're dealing with the financial impacts of events going right or events going wrong. Jim Digby has said gravity is the same anywhere numerous times, and it really is the case. Gravity is the same in Europe as it is in the United States or Canada or Australia or anywhere else. So this report very much, I think, highlighted that to me, that the concerns that we saw across markets were largely the same.
Absolutely. That's a great way to say it. We always say a snowflake doesn't know where it's falling, right? In the weather world, whether you're in Atlanta or in Minneapolis, the snowflake falls. And I think that mindset applies here. Do you think there are any unique weather challenges or regulatory challenges in Europe that might be a bit different than you find in North America event planning? Where do you see those gaps exist? Maybe where the differences do exist?
Again, I don't know if I see a whole lot of difference in, I guess, the planning models that people are applying. Broadly speaking, in event safety, North America, or specifically the United States, we're a bit behind the way Europe has thought about event safety, and the UK has thought about event safety, simply because our awakening, if we want to call it that, happened in 2011. It was a lot earlier in Europe. It was a lot earlier in the United Kingdom. So they're a bit ahead of the game. And in the States, and with the Event Safety Alliance, we've been very fortunate where we could draw upon the lessons learned from those other regions and apply them to what has happened. So in the United States, it's very much catching up. But I think, stepping back, one of the things that's jumped out to me this year, and I'm not a meteorologist, so you can correct me, is it seems things like the extreme heat that we have seen in portions of the United States for the last several years are now increasingly becoming more of a concern in the United Kingdom and in Europe. I mean, we're recording this at the tail end of a fairly extended, I believe, El Nino-driven heat event that has impacted the United Kingdom, impacted Europe, to where it's very funny when you're having phone calls with individuals over there, video calls, because air conditioning isn't as prevalent. You can see people just suffering because of the heat, whereas we're kind of used to it here at this point. But stepping back on that, I think that planning, if we are looking at an increased frequency of extreme heat events, I mean, that's going to be a planning consideration that's definitely going to end up becoming more of an issue in the United Kingdom, in Europe as well. But yeah, honestly, I go back to the fact a lot of it is very similar in what I'm seeing, and in my conversations I've had with folks, there's not a whole lot of difference. You have these little regional tweaks on things based upon what the local requirements happen to be. Event operators are event operators the world over.
Yeah, let's chat about heat safety for a moment, because I think if I go back to the 2011 event and the progression of weather safety, we were thinking about the really intense thunderstorms, lightning safety, really strong winds that might blow down some of these temporary structures. But heat safety has been, I've seen from a weather preparedness standpoint, kind of a recent, oh, wow, we really, really need to worry about this. We see that in the sports area. One of the unique ones that we've talked about at some of these event safety events is, okay, I deal with lightning safety and I've evacuated a venue, and now I've just put 40,000 people in these tight confines of protection. And heat safety all of a sudden becomes a problem because you're just packed in like sardines trying to stay out of the way of the lightning. What are some of the movements that you've seen from a heat safety perspective knowing that it's been a really big issue across Europe this year, but even here in the United States, what are some of the factors that you've seen being taken to protect against heat challenges?
Well, it's kind of it's sort of a two-part answer. On the operator side, you are seeing greater awareness in terms of our crew. Making sure that we're accounting for extreme heat with our crews, making sure we have plenty of shade, water, and a lot of that's driven by the state-by-state regulations that keep getting put in place. And there was for a while a conversation on the OSHA side of things of putting in sort of a heat-related OSHA standard. I think that's probably not happening here in the immediate future, but states such as California, Maryland, the rest of them are escaping me. They're having to put in more things such as rest breaks, provided water, understanding the symptoms of heat illness, heat stroke, and being proactive about looking out for such things. On the attendee side, it's largely the same. There's more some forward messaging that you get in, sending out to people, hey, it's going to be really hot. Be sure you're drinking plenty of water. You'll see a lot of events transition now where they're allowing reusable water bottles to come in so people can self-hydrate as opposed to doing where they have to go and you have to buy the water there, which does impact the finances, but it's the right thing to do, and it ultimately ends up keeping your audience safe to be sure that they are able to actually keep themselves properly hydrated. And it's so much of it is just awareness. It's I guess a good example would be I guess it would have been last week. It was the America's 250th celebration that was happening on July 4th. They actually, I guess it's postponed it, paused it. They closed it for a while and evacuated everyone and didn't bring them back until the evening because the heat was so intense that they were worried about, having some serious medical issues related to that. For something like that, which is a once in a 250-year type of event, that you have people coming in from all over the country, the expectations are very, very high for them to make that decision and say, this is what we're going to do. That stood out to me. I mean, it was definitely the right decision to make.
I totally agree with you. I think the other thing that I always think about with heat is it's sort of a slow draw threat, meaning lightning is very immediate. The storm comes up, the lightning is there, and you've got to make a really kind of quick fuse decision. Same with severe winds or a severe thunderstorm that comes plowing through and you see it coming and you make that really quick decision. Heat catches up to you. You might not even realize you're getting dehydrated. You might not realize that the heat is impacting you individually, and all of a sudden you start to feel sick. And so I've seen what you're describing play out where it's, let's educate early, make sure you're preparing early so that it doesn't sneak up and catch up to you, because it's not so obvious when the heat impacts a person individually.
Oh, 100%. I mean, I won't give any proper nouns, names, venues, anything like that. But I know that there was a show when I was managing a venue many, many years ago, larger festival show set up in, an asphalt parking lot, 12 hours, multiple stages, and an audience that probably had an average age of 14 or 15 years old. Midwest summer day, high heat, high humidity. I believe there was something in the ballpark of 93 heat-related medicals on that one show.
Wow.
And we had actually taken precautions at that point, set up misting tents and whatnot. It was young kids. They don't want to leave the stage. They want to stay at the stage to see their favorite act. They At least me, when I was that age, I didn't really have that much self-awareness of how I was doing physically. And I certainly didn't want to go spend my money on water. I wanted to buy a t-shirt. I wanted to do whatever it is. So it catches up on you. I do think that most demographics now are fairly aware of, so being mindful of how they are doing, and that the groups they're with are also intervening and making sure they're self-policing, making sure that they're looking out for themselves. And staff, event staff is also being aware of signs of distress and heat-related illness. Is becoming much more of a training focus to be able to recognize those and intervene early. So that's encouraging. It's not going to get any cooler, and unfortunately, I don't expect that this increased prominence of high heat-related incidents are going to die down anytime soon. So we just have to learn to be aware and to adapt to them.
Absolutely. I think one of the more interesting findings in the survey was, and I've watched this play out, a lot of the education that the GSA, UK CMA is doing is a lot on building a weather action plan, and like think about the weather way before an event ever begins.
Mm-hmm.
I can tell you from the DTN perspective, it throws a lot of caution in the wind when we get a phone call 48 hours before an event saying, I've got an event this weekend and it looks like the weather's going to be bad. We need a service in mind. And, so many of our customers we've seen are planning this 6 months or even a year in advance now in thinking about weather. But with that additional planning, our survey found that most organizations are still making weather decisions 48 hours within an event because the forecast gets kind of clued into that. What do you make of that result that came out in terms of there is more sophisticated planning, but the decisioning is occurring kind of right up to the event time or even as the event is going on?
I think a lot of that just simply comes down to, deciding to cancel or postpone or delay or reconfigure an event has consequences all the way downstream. And no one really wants to make a hasty decision. I don't get the sense that a lot of folks are just disregarding that decision making out of anything other than we don't want to act too fast and have it blow up in our face, because there are financial impacts. There are, you go on social media, you decide to cancel an event, and then the storm never comes, and you're just catching it from all sides from people who are like, it was just a little rain. Why did you cancel the show? Rah, 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 So they're waiting to the last possible minute, I think, to make the decision as to whether or not to proceed or to reconfigure how their event is going. I think if we wanted to get a little bit more granular on specific decisions within the event. So let's say that we are, the doors have opened, and we're looking at the forecast. We're chatting with the meteorologist on call, and we're getting this intelligence, and you're looking at this weather decision matrix and these predefined triggers that you have created. But even though it's right there in black and white, and it was there to make the decision easier, it's still, there's this hesitance about being the one who makes the call and gets it wrong. And because of that, I think that even though it's there in black and white, it still doesn't happen as rapidly as, or as clearly as it would otherwise. Because it's a big decision, and it takes a lot of confidence to be the one that's going to say, I trust our plan. I trust the information that has come from our meteorologist, and I trust that this is the right decision, and we're gonna postpone, or we're gonna delay opening, or we're gonna do whatever it is and face the consequences of that.
All right, so Jacob, talk to me about the UK CMA. What are some of the focus areas you guys are looking into as you think about growing event safety and crowd management in the UK?
Oh, wow. Well, obviously the UKCMA, we are laser focused on crowds. It's a little bit different than something like the Event Safety Alliance, where we have a very big picture. So that's kind of exciting, right? To be able to focus on the people, and I guess you would call them the most. All right, we're going to start this out. Ask me that question again, because I got distracted by my daughter just bounding up the stairs right now. So, okay. Ask me the question again, and this will be our cut point. Ready? Ready?
Yep. Are you there?
Can you hear me? Yeah. Right.
All right, Jacob. So as we wrap up here on DTNsights, you've been such an awesome guest. I would love to hear about your work at the UKCMA, what you are focused on, and how you are starting to bring some of your work from past at ESA over to the UK.
Yeah, well, one of the actually due in some measure to what Europe and the UK has been experiencing in terms of heat recently, but beforehand, we've really kind of taken a strong focus on weather awareness and preparedness at both the United Kingdom Crowd Management Association and the Global Crowd Management Alliance. We've been doing a lot of messaging campaigns, both to organizers about some of the considerations that they need to make when they're planning their events, as well as what guests should ultimately be focused on. At the GCMA, for example, we've put together a campaign in conjunction with DTN called Be Weatherwise. And that is an audience-focused campaign where they're just really quick hit things that you should keep in mind when you are planning to put together or attend an event. We launched that a number of months ago. It's gotten fantastic uptake. We're working with some venues to possibly kind of get those shown on the screens within there to kind of use as an audience awareness campaign. So very excited about that developing. We hosted a webinar on the GCMA side with a couple of folks from the DTN side about a summer weather outlook. And unprompted, we've been receiving these sort of outlook updates from one of your meteorologists, Stephen Davenport, who is a lovely, lovely gentleman, has been sending these over unprompted and saying, hey, here's an update. So we've been working on getting those out to our constituents, just to be sure that they're planning their events with the best, the most up-to-date information. And it's really about just sort of keeping an eye on what the greatest impacts related to weather and other safety issues are in terms of crowds, and being prepared to respond to that. Either, things in terms of trainings or webinars or podcasts such as this, or, just being in their inbox frequently and saying, hey, y'all, we're expecting extreme heat for the next 2 weeks here. If you're planning an event, go back, revisit your matrix, look to see who's coming, what adjustments can you make now, well before 48 hours in advance, so you can limit the number of decisions you need to make just prior to doors. So, I feel very blessed that the UKCMA and the GCMA and the ESA and our friends at NCS4 and all of these organizations, we're all working in little slightly different spheres, but we're all pushing for the same mission. And, that's been great that we can amplify each other's voices. And, I know that DTN's, a part of all of those. So on behalf of all of our sister organizations as well, thank you for being at the forefront of this and pushing the message of event safety forward.
It's so amazing. As I mentioned at the beginning, it's one of my most proud things to have seen in my career is how far this has come advanced. And it makes you, if you think back to going to an event, well, let's say 20 years ago at this point, we probably did it somewhat unsafely and didn't even realize it at the time. There's been so much advancement. I mean, it's really amazing to me. If I asked you, somebody has prepared weather safety correctly for an event and it goes off well, what are like a couple of things that you would say they have done correctly in order to keep the crowd safe? Like, is there sort of a poster child event that's run that is like really well in tune?
Oh, wow. I think like most things with safety, if you do it really, really well, you don't know. You only know when you did it wrong because you have evidence that there's been you've had a catastrophe on your hands. It's difficult for me to point to a single event that has done it particularly right. I mean, I guess the testament to the work of all of these organizations in the event safety space is that most folks that I see on the daily are doing it right. They're thinking about these things, even if they don't necessarily have the most, dialed in knowledge, it's on their radar. And to me, I would rather your weather plan be written on a napkin and tacked to the board than not having one at all. And I have seen weather matrices put together that are, these beautiful multicolor, multi-page giant documents. And I've seen them that have been a spreadsheet on people's computer. And to me, to want to pull back a line that's, kicked around ESA land for a number of years, which is plans don't save you, planning does. The fact of going through the process of thinking about the weather-related issues that you might face at your event and having the conversations with the stakeholders that are involved in that, and determining, okay, well, when we're facing X, Y, Z, you're going to be the one to make the decision, and you're going to be the one that's going to dial in with the local AHJs, and you're going to be the one communicating with the crowd. Even if it's not perfect, those conversations are happening. And to me, that's a success. If we get nothing else out of the last 15 years of ESA's existence and 25 years of UKCMA, and I've kind of lost, I think, 5 years of GCMA now, it's that. People are having the conversations. And I think we're always, unfortunately, going to see incidents occur, but the catastrophic incidents, weather-related, have been, I think, greatly, in my gut tells me they have been prevented because smart decision making is starting to work its way through the multiple layers of the industry.
I totally agree with you. And there's no such thing as a perfect plan. I think it was Mike Tyson that said everybody's got a plan till you get punched in the face. And that's probably, there's an appropriateness to that quote that makes sense. Yes. What I always say is, like, if you can make your decision with conviction because you've done your preparation, you can be satisfied with the outcome of what happens. And I've been part of deciding to evacuate a stadium and it didn't even rain. But I've had conviction in that because I knew there was still a lightning threat that could have been dangerous to those that were in the stadium. I did get booed for that, but I didn't feel all that bad about it. And that's okay. We call it the rainless rain delay. Yeah.
You bring up an excellent, thing that I saw this, I think it was a couple months ago now. And forgive me, I don't remember who the artist happened to be. It was a country artist, and I believe the show was in Oklahoma. So I think that's about what I remember of that. But they ended up having to cancel. They postponed a show, and the artist came out and wouldn't have been my messaging choice, but basically was insinuating, well, I was forced into this. There was nothing I can do. Okay, whatever, a little bit of face saving sort of thing. But what I found encouraging was that if you read through the comments, you had, of course, the people grumbling about, it was just a little rain. You shouldn't have canceled it. Why did you do this? Boo-hoo. But the number of people that stepped in and said, you know what? It's okay. we get it. Safety is first. You made the right call here. We're disappointed, but you made the right call. And to me, I guess that means it's starting to, seep into people that, sometimes you make a decision, and sometimes that decision ends up being, you don't end up facing the situation that you thought you were going to end up facing. But that awareness is now people are going to be understanding of that. So that's encouraging. I think that, the general public, they have seen incidents that have happened, not even weather-related incidents, but a number of incidents that have happened at live events and other mass gatherings, and kind of went, okay, I'm glad they're thinking about these things, even if I don't like the fact that they had to postpone the show or I have been inconvenienced by this.
Yeah, and for the longest time, and in a lot of my career, the story was always it hit without warning. And you don't hear that nearly as much anymore, which tells us that we're progressing. I'd rather take one step too safe than one step not enough in this scenario. And so if something's hitting without warning, I can tell you that there's a giant failure along the way, because there are tools to help prevent this. If you have a plan in place and you follow those tools, you'll make great decisions the vast majority of the time. And going back to one of your first responses is, we've made tremendous progress, but we'll get humbled enough to have to continue to make progress, and that's okay as well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that, outdoor events, I think there seems to be almost a universal understanding at this point that weather has an impact on outdoor live events, and the thinking is there. I don't know if that thinking is as prevalent with indoor venues, and thinking about, I think I still see a little bit of a break with folks that are running indoor venues, and like, oh, I don't have to really think about weather here. Despite the fact you have people that are queuing up outside of your venue for X number of hours to end up getting in. You have, staff out in parking lots directing traffic. You have, people commuting to and fro. I mean, weather impacts all venues, regardless of whether or not they're indoor or outdoor. So to me, yeah, we're probably doing a really good job getting that message to folks with outdoor events. I think we have some work to do to get it to the folks that are doing indoor events, to kind of realize, this applies to you as well. So I always like a challenge. That's my next one.
Absolutely. Well, Jacob, as I mentioned before, super appreciative of you for helping us promote the survey and helping us get that together. There's such unique insights that tell us that we've made progress and have more to go. And the work that you do with the various organizations that you are on the board of and help support with goes a really long ways to ensure that when we take ourselves and our families and friends to these events that give us so much joy, that we can do it in a safe manner. And just appreciative of the work you've done throughout your career and will continue to do. We are honored as DTN to get to partner with you in that.
And we're truly grateful for your all the types of support which DTN has shown both of the organizations that I'm involved with. I mean, and it's hard in the nonprofit world to be able to fight a battle and to get people to pay attention to you. And we could only do it when the really smart people in the room are willing to say, yes, we will help you do it. And you've been nothing but gracious in terms of sharing your knowledge with our constituents. And, thank you for that.
Absolutely. What a cool episode of DTNsights. Always fun to talk about the live event industry, and to do it with my friend Jacob means the world to me. So thanks for joining us today.
Absolutely, Renny. Thank you. And anyone who is interested, you can go to the ukcma.com or the gcma.com, find out a little bit about what we're doing. That's not a pitch. I just like to let everyone know that we're out there and we're working on behalf of everyone who's working at or attending live events. So come check us out.
Excellent. Thank you, everybody, for joining us for this episode of DTNsights.